It takes just one bad day for a good man to turn into a monster. Arthur Fleck, a party clown, prepares himself for work. He looks into the mirror, twisting his mouth upwards and downwards as a single tear slides down his cheek. He steps out onto the street, dancing as he advertises a sign for the store that hired him. Suddenly, a group of kids snatch the sign from him and run away. Arthur chases them into an alley where the cruel children end up beating and kicking him. After a day to forget, Arthur goes to see his therapist. The man laughs uncontrollably. His laughter is a tragic contradiction, an act usually associated with joy and pleasure, but for him, it only expresses suffering. It's as if his laughter is a form of crying, a way of releasing the anguish he feels inside. Arthur tells her how hard things are getting outside. She agrees, it's tense, and people are angry. The therapist asks him about his diary, and Arthur hands it over, telling her he's been using it as a joke diary because he wants to be a comedian. She flips through it and finds some disturbing entries. The woman asks him how he feels coming to these sessions, and Arthur responds that he felt better when he was locked up in the hospital. Arthur asks the therapist if they could increase his medication, and she points out that he's already taking 7. He just wants to stop feeling bad. The therapy ends, and Arthur boards a bus where he tries to make a child laugh. However, the child's mother gets upset and tells him to stop. Arthur starts to laugh uncontrollably, and the woman takes offense. So the man hands her a card to apologize, explaining that he laughs due to a neurological condition. This condition is real, called pseudobulbar affect, which makes a person laugh uncontrollably and inappropriately and is caused by a neurological disorder or brain injury. Arthur arrives at the building where he lives, which is in terrible condition. He checks the mailbox and then goes up to his apartment where he lives with his sick mother, Penny. She asks him if they received any mail, but he responds that they didn't. Penny has been writing letters to her former employer, Thomas Wayne, and hopes to receive a response someday. Following this, the Murrah and Franklin talk show begins, and as they watch, Arthur imagines he is in the audience, and Franklin notices him and asks him to stand up. In the fantasy, Arthur stands and shares how he takes care of his mother, and his purpose in life is to spread joy and laughter, which Franklin respects, so he asks him to come down to the stage. Arthur descends amongst applause, and Franklin tells him that he would give up everything to have a son like him, and they embrace. Arthur returns to reality and smiles. This fantasy gives us a glimpse into Arthur's psyche. He religiously takes care of his mother, and in return, she validates him for being a good person. Arthur takes pride in this and yearns for external validation, something he has never experienced. The next day at work, his coworker Randall heard about the beating he took, so he gives him a gun for protection. Just then, the boss calls Arthur and tells him that the clients complained about him for disappearing and not returning the sign. Arthur explains that he was assaulted, but his boss doesn't believe him, so he tells him that the cost of the sign will be deducted from his paycheck. Arthur leaves and kicks a trash can to vent his valid frustration. Afterwards, he returns to his apartment, sharing the elevator with his neighbor Sophie, and exchanges a few smiles with her. Next, Arthur bathes his mother as she again asks if they have received any letter from Wayne. Arthur asks her what she expects, and she answers that they help them. But Arthur asks her not to worry about the money because his comedy show will be a big hit. The next day, Arthur follows Sophie around the city, and in the evening, attends a stand-up comedy performance to take some notes, which he continues to develop when he returns home. It's clear that he writes with his right hand, but suddenly he stiffens and switches hands. It seems like he's someone else. Something is growing inside him. He smiles and writes. The worst part about having a mental illness is that people expect you to behave as if you don't. Mental illnesses are often invisible, leading many to dismiss them and lack empathy and compassion. This statement is a critique of the misunderstanding and mistreatment of mental illness. It expresses the struggle of people with mental conditions who are expected to conform to societal norms of behavior, but don't receive adequate support, understanding, or empathy from people, making their struggle heavier. Just then, Sophie knocks on his door and asks if he has been following her. Arthur admits that he has. They joke about it, and he makes her laugh. Sophie tells him, "You're funny, Arthur," which is strange since he never gave her his name. However, he decides to invite her to a comedy show he will be doing soon. The next day, Arthur works as a clown entertaining sick children, but during his act, his gun falls to the floor. His boss finds out about the incident and is angry. Arthur tries to convince him that the gun was just a prop, but he doesn't believe him, as his co-worker Randall claimed that Arthur wanted to buy a gun from him last week, and he finally fires him. Filled with frustration, Arthur takes the subway home. In the same car, there are 3 men harassing a woman. Arthur starts to laugh suddenly, drawing the men's attention, who, offended, turn to harass him. Arthur tries to explain, but the men beat him. Tired of the cruelty of others, the clown pulls out his gun and kills the 3 men. Arthur realizes what he has done and, panicked, runs to the local park bathrooms. There the anxiety fades and he starts to dance. That other part of him, that lives within him, manifests itself again. Moments later, he returns to his apartment building and, very sure of himself, something abnormal in him, knocks on Sophie's door, and when she opens, Arthur kisses her, and they spend the night together. The next day, Arthur goes to his job to pick up his belongings and hears his co-workers discussing the news of a clown who shot 3 men. They also offer words of sympathy, including Randall, whose hypocrisy irritates Arthur, so he tells everyone that it was his gun that committed the crime. Arthur returns home and, after taking his last pills, joins his mother to watch the news. Thomas Wayne appears on it, because the murdered men were employees of his company, and he claims that they were educated and decent men. They ask him about the city's new anti-rich sentiment, and Wayne says he wants to be mayor to fix it. And when asked about the killer, he says the killer hides his face because he is a coward and essentially labels the less privileged as clowns who do nothing with their lives. This angers many people who, in protest, adopt the figure of the clown as their symbol. Discontent and civil unrest are inevitable in any broken system that serves some but not others. Days later, Arthur goes to see his therapist again. He complains that she never listens to him. He tells her that he finally feels like he exists and people are starting to notice him, but she only responds by telling him that the government has cut their funding and this will be their last session, and they can no longer provide him with medication. She also adds that the government doesn't care about people like him or her. They don't matter, but the funny thing is that when people commit crimes, they often emphasize their mental conditions. At night, Arthur performs his comedy show at a bar. Sophie is there. When he takes the stage, he starts laughing uncontrollably, and when he finally manages to read some jokes, they don't cause laughter. Arthur returns to his apartment and reads a new letter his mother wrote in which she claims that he is Wayne's son. Immediately, he confronts his mother, and Penny explains that she and Wayne were in love, but they had to keep up appearances. The next day, Arthur visits Wayne Manor and encounters a young Bruce, who, for those unaware, will later become Batman. Arthur does some magic tricks, and then Alfred appears, threatening to call the police. The clown tells him that he is Penny's son, and he wants to see Mr. Wayne because he knows everything, but Alfred tells him that his mother was delusional, and he laughs at him. When he returns home, Arthur finds that his mother is being taken to the hospital because she suffered a stroke, and he gets in the ambulance to accompany her. In the hospital, 2 police officers approach him wanting to question him about the subway crimes since his former boss told them about the gun incident with the children. Arthur, while smoking a cigarette with his right hand, tells them it was just a prop and goes back to see his mother. In the room, Arthur turns on Franklin's program only to end up hurt, as the presenter shows clips of his comedy show to make fun of him, calling him a joker. Back in his apartment, he sees people protesting with clown masks outside a cinema where Thomas Wayne is. Arthur decides to go and sneaks into the building. He meets Wayne in the bathroom and tells him that Penny is his mother. Thomas tells him that his mother was insane, that she was in Arkham Hospital, and that he was actually adopted. Arthur gets frustrated, which causes him to laugh. Wayne is offended and hits him for it before leaving. The few pillars his tragic life was based on have been crumbling one by one. The next day, he receives a call from Franklin's production inviting him to appear on the show, and Arthur obviously accepts. He then takes a bus to Arkham Hospital where he reads his mother's file and confirms that she was psychotic and that he was adopted. But he also discovers something disgusting. Penny raised him with a boyfriend who abused him, and she allowed it. Disbelieving what he has just read, Arthur goes home and enters Sophie's apartment without warning. She finds him and is scared and asks him to leave. Arthur and Sophie never spent time together. Their entire relationship was a product of his mind. At this moment, Arthur has lost his identity. He is now a blank slate, erased from the past he thought he knew. He is neither Fleck nor Wayne. He's simply an adopted individual with no registered name. This is timely for that other part of him that manifested to take control. The next day, Arthur visits his mother. While smoking a cigarette with his left hand, he tells her that his laughter is not a disease, but part of his personality. He then adds that he used to think his life was a tragedy, but now he sees that it is actually a comedy. And after that, he suffocates her. His other personality that will adopt the name Joker has taken the forefront. It is the only piece of identity left to him, and the only one that has made him feel noticed and empowered. Arthur suffered recurrent abuse and trauma in his childhood, so it is possible that he dissociates himself as a way to protect himself from extremely stressful situations. The duality of the character is seen in that Arthur is right-handed, Joker is left-handed. Arthur is shy and insecure, Joker is strong and confident. Arthur's body language is hunched, tense, and nervous. Joker's is upright, free, and fluid. Arthur embodies goodness while Joker adheres to no moral code. On the other hand, he realized that his life is a comedy. Pascal once said that nothing induces laughter as much as the striking discrepancy between what we anticipate and what actually transpires. Comedy often underscores the ludicrous aspects of life. Arthur's life and his experiences are ludicrous. To expect a child who was mistreated and abused, yet still strived to be good, to meet only humiliation and misfortune is absurd. Yet that's precisely what we witness. His life is a comedic tragedy, highlighting the absurdity and incongruity of a society that expects him to be a productive and functional member. But no matter how hard he tries, he consistently finds it impossible to meet those expectations due to his mental condition and the violent and unequal social environment he's in. Later, Arthur prepares for Franklin's show. He dyes his hair green and begins to apply his makeup, only to be interrupted by the doorbell. His former co-workers, Gary and Randall, visit him after learning of Penny's death. Though Randall is only there because the police have been questioning clowns, and Arthur has his gun. Tired of his hypocrisy, Arthur confronts him. Gary is scared, but Arthur lets him leave unharmed as he was the only one who treated Arthur kindly. This story is not about excusing or justifying the Joker, but about understanding how individuals can slip through the societal cracks. As the Joker said in this comic that inspired the film, it only takes one bad day to reduce the sanest man alive to lunacy. What happened to Arthur could have been prevented with more care, support, understanding, and compassion. By being better people, treating others with respect, and making them feel like they belong in this world rather than making them feel isolated. Shortly after, Arthur, now the Joker, dons his new suit and dances towards the show, with the police hot on his trail. Arthur flees into the subway, which is teeming with people wearing clown masks en route to protests. This confuses the police, and Arthur manages to slip away undetected. Shortly afterward, he arrives at the studio. While waiting in the dressing room, Franklin approaches him, asking him to refrain from any protests or controversies. Arthur reassures him and requests to be introduced as the Joker, referencing how Franklin had mocked him. Shortly thereafter, he is called onto the stage and makes his entrance with a dance. He attempts to tell a joke about death, but is met with ridicule. Then he confesses to being the subway murderer and delivers a monologue about the systemic failure to protect everyday people. The city is in an uproar over the deaths of Wayne's employees. But if he had been the one to die, nobody would have batted an eye. He claims that people nowadays are atrocious and lack empathy. He accuses Franklin of being just as terrible for inviting him onto the show to belittle him. He points the gun at Franklin and delivers his final punchline: "What do you get when you cross a lonely mental patient with a system that abandons him? You get what you deserve." With this dark joke, the Joker executes Franklin on live television. The entire city watches the broadcast, sparking widespread protests. Arthur is apprehended, but en route to jail, the patrol car is rammed by an ambulance driven by protesters, knocking him unconscious. The rebels extract him from the car and place him on the hood. Arthur regains consciousness to find himself surrounded by cheering and applauding protesters. He reciprocates their applause with a dance. Meanwhile, the Waynes exit a theater, only to be followed and gunned down by a protester, leaving young Bruce the sole survivor. Days later, Arthur is in a session with a therapist at Arkham Asylum. The facility seems starkly different in this scene. Arthur laughs, but this time he does it out of genuine amusement. The therapist asks him what's so amusing, to which he replies that she wouldn't understand, and begins to sing. In the end, we see the Joker walking down the hallway, leaving a trail of bloody footprints. Could it be that everything was merely a figment of Arthur's imagination? It's virtually impossible to discern what was real and what was not. Arthur has proven himself to be an unreliable narrator. Even in the comics, the Joker states, "Sometimes I remember it one way, sometimes another. If I'm going to have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice." But take note that Arthur is no longer laughing in pain, but in mirth, reflecting the alternate personality that has now taken over his identity. In this context, perhaps what we witnessed throughout the film was a process of transformation. The bloody footprints may symbolize the definitive demise of Arthur and the emergence of the Joker. Ultimately, this film scrutinizes a dysfunctional system that breeds its own monsters. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. A child not embraced by the village will, when grown, set the village ablaze to feel its warmth.